back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gregory Ball, Director of Digital Strategy and Production over at Embrace Boston, and you are now tuned in to the latest episode of Good Trouble. And as always, we try to bring you great people with great information, great energy, and this person that I have for us today is, like I say many times, is a troublemaker of the highest order. And we are probably going to be coming out with a relationship podcast right after this. But for today, we are going to be talking about her incredible journey, and we're going to be talking about all things political in the Boston area. Welcome today, my new favorite person in the world.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Okay.
Were you worried that you weren't my favorite?
Well, I didn't know. I mean, I said some pretty ballsy stuff. So.
Well, I expect that from you, ladies and gentlemen. Jacquetta Van Zandt is my guest today.
I'm so glad to be here. Really, I am.
I'm glad that we can finally get it together and get you here. And you know, one of the reasons I was super excited about having a conversation with you is because I am a frequent listener to your show.
Thank you.
Your show / podcast, which is available. And for those of you who don't know, Jacquetta is the host of Politics and Prosecco. I have always pronounced it wrong. Say it.
Politics and Prosecco.
Thank you. See, this shows you that I am not as cultured as she is, because I just call it wine. But it's a fancy wine.
It's a fancier wine.
Fancy wine that go with the fancy whole accoutrement. See? Got
today,
that
at least, yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But let's start talking about that. You know, you've before you got to the space where you're a commentator and you're talking about things, you've actually had a pretty interesting political journey. Where did that start at? Like, what was the thing that sparked you, that had little Jacquetta say, you know what, politics is my thing?
So I've always had a big mouth.
Really?
And so my parents were very involved in the community. Okay. Maybe not to the political. I mean, they weren't working on campaigns, but my parents believed that you take a lot out of the community, you have to put a lot back in. And so when I got to college, actually even before that, I was in high school, and my history teacher, my detention, because I was a smart mouth in this class.
Again, shocking.
I know. My detention was to go with him to a call center for Bill Clinton. He was running for re-election. And I realized that, I can change people's minds over the phone. And I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, I can talk all the crap I want and get people to vote. And so that's where it really lit the fire. When I got to college, I started working for Barney Frank as an intern. So I would work in his office in the evening, answering all of his constituent calls, and then I would go to D.C. for the summer. And I learned mostly from Rep. Frank that politics is really all about building relationships and being political in those relationships. That rolled into me getting calls to work on different campaigns across the country, and I knew I wanted to sharpen my skills. I could be organized. I started off being a scheduler, which is a very hard job in politics because it's maintaining somebody's calendar, but you get to know who the players are. You get to understand who the fundraisers are. You understand who the power players are behind the scenes.
So you get a lay of the land, essentially.
And I utilize that. I would write little things down like, Mika has a black cat that's sick. And I would make sure that the candidate knew that. And then when he saw that person, how's your cat? And I learned that is the best way to get into people's heads. So it just rolled from there. I met a guy named Joel Bridgman who asked me to come on the campaign for Obama in 2008 when nobody was paying attention to Barack Obama. And so I did that. We won Iowa. I got sent to Ohio, worked that, turned that into a White House job, and then I was off from there.
Wow. So, I'm just going back to the original piece of it, because I know that there's a certain temperament that people have to have for politics. I think that the general, if you ask the average person about politics, they just automatically have a disdain for politics and politicians. Yeah. When you talk to them about the issues, they have a different kind of feel about it. But when you talk to them about politics, and I know that's a completely different animal than the actual pieces. So what was it that once you got into it, what was it that made you stay in it? Because I could imagine that if you're kind of one of those wide-eyed optimist people who kind of hit the ground and then you start to see kind of how the sausage is made, then it could kind of turn you off. So what kind of kept you into the game?
Well, one, I just naturally am a people person. I like to be around people. I'm an extrovert. It's what I do. I prefer to be around people. I like to hear people's stories. And for me, what's kept me grounded is I never wavered from who I was. I never let anybody change my mind on how I felt about the issues. It didn't matter the candidate I was working for. If I believed in a certain value, I stuck with that. And I didn't let that deter me from a person, a party, our legislation or anything else like that. But I also remembered that there's no loyalty in politics. These people are not my friends. They are working for me. I am working for them. And I keep those very separate. I'm somebody who compartmentalizes everyone. Everyone has a box. And that's going to be on our relationship podcast. I know.
Okay.
It's the reason why I keep getting dumped. But
Boy. Go ahead. I can see what this hour is going to be like. Go ahead.
But I compartmentalize people and I keep them in the spaces that feed what I need from them and what they need from me. And that's been able to keep me grounded in politics. That's actually not my real life.
But so you were talking about the kind of the inspiration that you got from your family in terms of their kind of commitment to community. What was it for you that made you be able to tie that along with the political side? Because I know that you can be in service of the community without necessarily getting into politics.
Well, I mean, in our culture, a lot of our politics comes from the church. My grandmother was the first person that ever took me on a protest march. She lived in Memphis. My grandmother owned a lot of land in Memphis, and she was a member of the AME Church. And as you know, the AME Church is very political in their idealism and a lot of the values that they have in concert with the teachings of Jesus Christ. And so my grandmother took me on a protest march when I was 8 years old to Dillard's. And if you're not familiar from the South, Dillard's is like, it's like their version of Macy's.
Okay.
And my grandmother put an American flag in my hand and said, "You have a big mouth. I expect you to use it." And we were protesting wage equity, which at 8 years old, I didn't know that's what we were. I just did what my grandmother told me to do because she was in charge and everybody did what my grandmother told them to do. But what has always stuck with me, and the reason why I love that story so much, is because my grandmother was speaking life to me, even when I didn't realize she was speaking life into me. She's right. I was Black. I was a woman. I had to have something to make sure people understood that I was here and I wasn't going to take any crap. And so I used my mouth, my big mouth, to get the things that I wanted or to talk about injustices that I saw. So that is what, even to this day, I don't like to be around other people who don't stand up for other people. And I'm not going to let any injustice just slide.
So, you talked about you were getting into the political space and some of the work that you had done. But one of the things that I saw that I thought was remarkable is your work in Framingham. Tell us a little bit about that.
So Yvonne Spicer, Dr. Yvonne Spicer, was essentially a corporate person. And she decided she was going to run for mayor once Framingham decided that they were going from to be a big town to a small city or a mid-sized city. And I cold called her and I said, "I heard you're going to drop out of this race," because she was going to drop out of the race. And I said, "I will work for you for free if you let me use this strategy and I can come and help you." And I think she was so impressed that I would cold call her. I never met her a day in my life. And she said, "Come on." And so me, Wes Ritchie, and a few other folks put together a strategy that we knew could win. She was already a dynamic person, and we just put that into play. But what's interesting about that for me is, one, nobody else in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts can say they put a Black woman in a mayoral seat except for me and Wes Ritchie. Secondly, what's important about that is anybody can serve. There's a great quote by Dr. King when he's talking in his drum major speech, and he's talking in this parable about Jesus talking to his disciples, and he says, "If you want to be important, wonderful. If you want to be recognized, wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. But recognize that he who is among you shall be your servant." And that just means that anybody can serve because anybody can be great, and anybody can be great because anybody can serve. And I love that quote because that's exactly what I think I do every day when I'm going into politics. I may not be the person running for office, but I can certainly put together a strategy. I can certainly work the numbers. I can certainly do the data. I can be great behind the scenes in service to people and my culture and my community.
Well, I think, because before we move on from that, because I'm just fascinated by the fact that not only this city was going from it was a transformational moment, transformative moment rather, where they're trying to determine what their future is.
Yeah. And they
really,
already had somebody in mind. Like they had like this, what I call the son of Framingham. This was a guy who was already a state rep. He already had been on the town council at some point in his life. His family was well established in Framingham, but he did not have the leadership skills that was needed to take this from a town to a city. What I knew is that Dr. Yvonne Spicer, who had already been a leader, she was working at the Museum of Science. She had done leadership roles other places. She understood the inner workings of business of the city, even though she had never run for office. But she had the leadership skills that he lacked. He wasn't in it to do service. He was in it for his own glory, to just become mayor and to have that as part of his resume. She was really in it to be of service to the community. She had lived there for 21 years, so that was her home. And she understood what it needed and what it looked like. And we just put that all into play.
Yeah, because I'm like, how do you get, one, you're getting everybody who's just coming to grips with the idea of having a mayor anyway.
Right.
Then you're getting against somebody who's kind of entrenched in the political fabric of that city, and that's who you're going against.
Yes.
And you were able to turn it around because, like you said, she was about to quit, to be able to not only get her from quitting, but to get her in the seat.
Well, it was also generational, right? Like I consider myself fearless. Like I don't fear any challenge when it comes to politics. You know, a lot of people say, well, can so-and-so win? You can win if you think you're going to win. You know, if you don't think you're going to win, you're not going to win. So I was fearless in thinking like, one, I don't know anything about this guy, so he can't do anything to me. He can't hurt me politically. He can't hurt me career-wise. I was just unapologetic about going in and destroying him. Whereas she came from a space of this was her community, this was her neighborhood. So she was there was some trepidation there. But once the two of us got together, it was like a powerhouse. Like my lack of fear fueled her to have no fear. And it worked out just perfectly.
And it's interesting where I listen to people in politics, because a lot of the same energy that I hear in politics is what I hear in sports. And that kind of competitive nature, like we're going to win. Does that feel right in terms of your experience?
I can't play basketball or football or baseball. I can swim. I was on the swim team.
Okay.
But yes, that same kind of competition, I always want to win. And not in a dangerous way, but just like I have always hated, even as a child, for somebody to tell me I couldn't do something. It just pissed me off. So I would turn that into a fight. You know, not necessarily like, fisticuffs, but certainly like, oh, you don't think I can do this? Okay, I'm going to do this. It's like, I'm going to save that for our relationship podcast. I was just going to say, what I was going to say is like, it's like, you being dumped by somebody and then you level up when that happens and the person comes back and you're like, oh, by the way, yeah, I've had like, I've leveled up. I've got like 6 degrees now.
So it's not even about the love of the new person. It's just to be able to stunt on the old person and be like,
or not even just flex on them. It's just simply like, for me, when someone tells me I can't have something, I'm not going to be able to do something, it just fuels me enough to be like, okay, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you what you missed. I'm going to show you that I'm a star. I'm going to show you that I'm a catch. And that's just the way it is. And I'm not going to block you because I want you to see me.
You see what you missed out on. Yes. You missed out on all of this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why not?
So how do you translate that into service of the community? Because in an example of with Dr. Spicer is just, taking that determination, that kind of that grit, and putting it behind somebody who truly wants to do good seems like the kind of perfect mix.
I think for me, I I wanted to make sure that people saw her as an individual, not as a politician. It was important to show her leadership skills. It was important to show her people skills and to understand that this is about to be something new for everybody. Now, she's not going to always have the answers, but I also got to play the anger translator behind the scenes. So what I did was when I would write speeches for her or I would advise her on, communicating towards, a piece of policy or legislation, I would fuel my competition and take everything that we heard during the campaign. Even when we got into office, there was still some detractors. I fueled all of that into how she would communicate with people, what kind of policy and legislation that we would either advocate for or be a member for, or stand on. I fueled all of that because what I heard was she can't win. And I wanted to show them not only can she win, we will win. Now she's a winner, and now you got to eat.
So how do you take that historic win, and then what is your next step? What is your after that?
I never know. That's such a good question. I never know. I don't plan out what the next goal is. I let whatever happen kind of curate what's going to happen. I didn't think I had already made history with Barack Obama, right? So I'd already been a part of a historical campaign. So it wasn't about making history. It was more so, who's the next Yvonne Spicer?
Okay.
Or who's the next Jacquetta, right? Like, I'm always thinking about that. I don't want to be somebody who's 65 years old still trying to hang on to campaigns. I want my legacy to be, I've created 12 more Jacquettas. I know that scares a lot of people, and that's fine.
I'm glad you said it, because see, Nev, I said it would have been wrong. But you said it, so it's okay. Go ahead.
But I would rather six more Jacquettas or 12 more Jacquettas than me trying to hang on and just suck up all the air in the room. So I never think about what happens next or who the next candidate's going to be or what the next campaign I'm going to work on or what issue. I always just think about, how do I create a legacy?
So when you left that administration, what's your next step?
I went to work for Joe Kennedy. He was running for U.S. Senate, and I didn't know Joe at the time. I knew a little bit about, obviously, right? You live in Massachusetts, you know about the Kennedys, right? I wasn't a huge Kennedy, historian. I couldn't tell you what JFK's favorite color was. I never watched any of the movies. I just didn't look at them that way. So I didn't know much. I was going into this kind of blind. I had saw him a few times. I watched a few of his speeches. I met him when I was working for Dr. Spicer. And so when he ran, and then I found out he was running against Ed Markey, I jumped on board. I don't particularly, I'm not a fan of Ed Markey. I'm not a fan of his policies. I'm not a fan of his flip-flopping. So I knew I wanted to work to get him out of office. And I also, so people should know, I believe in term limits, and I just felt like it was time for Ed Markey to go. So when I went to work for Joe, I was very clear with him about what I wanted to do. I was like, listen, I can turn out the black vote for you. And I did. I can turn out the black vote for you. But here's what I'm going to need. I need you to be authentic about what your plans are for the black community. And not just the black community, specifically black communities in gateway cities, Worcester, Springfield, Lawrence, Boston, places like that were getting hit hardest, especially during the pandemic, but nobody was talking about it. And so, we vibed from there. He's a great guy. You've never seen a skinny dude eat as much as him, by the way. Never.
Okay.
Never. And, once we got to know each other and a lot of the mask dropped off, I understood who he was as a person. That's a heavy legacy to carry as a Kennedy, but also his full self-worth was in service to people. He had, worked in Dominican Republic. He's even now with Groundwork Project, he's doing things in the Delta down in Mississippi, and taking on poverty. And these are things that mean the most to him. And so it's kind of what I wanted to do in service. And so that's why we clicked and aligned. So that's who I went to work for.
Okay. So how does that legacy lead into you having your own talk show?
Well, so after Joe, I got a call from Pratt Wiley from the partnership who said, listen, I have this job in mind and I have it with you in mind. Do you know anybody who would be interested in the job? And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, if you wrote it for me, like.
Well, I mean, I would imagine that the presumption was
I wasn't available.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You hot in the streets. You know, you got a new single. You know what I'm saying? You
I'm gonna drop my EP next week. What you mean?
You spitting hot bars. You know, they expecting that they can't get you on board.
Exactly. But so I went to work for the partnership, and then the pandemic hit. Literally months later.
So it was when you're vice president of engagement at the partnership, right?
Yes, vice president of engagement. So I build out strategic relationships within the community. And the pandemic, so I started in October of 2019, and the pandemic hit months later. And we went fully remote. But while I was remote, I was like, God, there's nothing to do. Trump was all over the airwaves spreading disinformation. Because I was in politics, all my friends, even on election day, who am I voting for? What are the issues? So I was already that person. And I was just like, well, maybe I should just like get online and just start telling people so everybody can stop calling me or emailing me, because I'm sitting in this house doing nothing and everybody else is sitting in the house doing nothing. So I was getting all kinds of phone calls. And I just said, I was actually talking to Julia Mejia and I was roasting her over the phone, like, which is what we do. I was roasting her. Lydia was roasting me. It was what I was doing with them over the kitchen table or over the phone anyway. And Julia said, you should turn this into a podcast, like where you're just roasting elected officials. And I was like, I don't know how much that's going to go over, but she had $1 million idea. So I turned it into a podcast because what I knew was I could get a lot of these elected officials to talk to me like they were talking to their friends, throw some alcohol in there because I had already been drinking with many of them anyway. My drink of choice is Prosecco.
Yes.
And so I wanted to do a little play on it. This is before everybody started doing the politics and then adding a drink to it. So I would get, I don't want to say sauced, but like I would start drinking Prosecco and I would ask my elected official friends come on the show, and it just grew from there. I had no idea that the people from the Globe were looking or NBC were looking or paying attention to any of this. And I started getting phone calls from news stations asking me, would I drop a quote or something like that? It grew so quickly and so fast that I couldn't even keep up with it. It was to the point where I couldn't even do a show every Friday because I was getting pulled into other stations to do shows. So I'm thankful, God is good. I had no idea that people would actually want to hear what I have to say. And that's why I'm here. That's how I got here.
Well, part of it is that your approach to it is a combination of like this depth of knowledge and the entertainment factor of you just knowing how to talk, and like you put those together and it makes it interesting. So
yes.
I'm learning something, and I feel like we're in a space where you have to almost hide the medicine in the applesauce.
Yes.
So when I'm watching your show, I'm doing that. Like there's a couple of people that say that like if I want to know what's going on in a political sphere, that I tap into our friend and my person that I always crack jokes with, and we have a long-standing rivalry about whether Roxbury or Dorchester is better.
Roxbury.
Dorchester is Dr. Rufus Falk. And then
I love Dr. Falk.
And the other person that I always key in, I was like, what does she think about this is you.
Thank you.
So...
Well, I never do it in malice, right? Like it's never done in malice. It's literally just me cracking jokes and putting it, because people don't want to hear just a bunch of political jargon all the time. And I don't even want to hear that. And we were living in a space where the leader of our country was so divisive and had so much rhetoric and was targeting certain groups that we had to bring some levity to it. There needed to be some... Let me take a deep breath. And so what I did was I turned to local politics because I knew a lot of these people. I knew where their bodies were buried. And so it was easier for me to crack on them because I couldn't crack on the president. I didn't have a relationship with him, but I did have a relationship with a lot of these people, and they with me. And if you watch some of those early shows, they're roasting me at the same time. Liz Miranda roasts me all the time. So... It's all love.
Well, now the latest part of the show is that you've moved and you're part of the Spark FM family.
Yes.
So how did that come about?
Danielle Johnson, who founded Spark FM, called me up, and I had never met her either. And I didn't know she was paying attention to the show.
How is your phone number just out available like that, where everybody just call you?
My father does give out my number to people. He gave my number to an ex like 3 weeks ago. I was like, brother, I don't talk to him no more. But anyway, if you want to know my number, call my dad. He'll give it to you. Apparently,
try to re-spark rekindle the flame.
I don't know. So, so Danny called me up and said, listen, this election is out of control. We don't know what to do. We need somebody who can talk politics to an audience of folks. I've been watching your show. I'd love for you to come and do something with Spark. And I was totally impressed because I had been watching her show, the morning show she does, Saucy and Friends, and thinking, we're just so worlds apart. That's the assumption. But I was a fan of her. She was a fan of mine, and it just worked out perfectly. And so now I have a bigger audience because of her show, because of Spark FM. And I'm able to have a more professional setting. I was doing Zoom in like my office at home with just me, a microphone, and like a spotlight. And, now I'm professional.
Oh, yeah. And yes, you are. Yes, you are. And shout out to Spark FM. I know they just opened their new studios just recently.
Yes. 1195 Blue Hill Avenue. Make sure you stop by.
Yes. So now that we know your whole political journey.
Yes.
The question I have for you is, are we going to have a democracy in a couple weeks?
Oh, goodness. Okay. So, this is going to sound crass, and I'm sorry about this, but no matter who wins on November 5th, you and I, our lives are not going to change, right? We're in a space where we can still afford to buy groceries, and we'll get up and you'll have a job, I'll have a job. It's not about us. It's certainly about people who don't have those things. And the reason why this election is so consequential is because you're not voting for you, you're voting for the future. You're voting for kids who are coming out of high school and college now, who won't be able to find jobs, or who may come from immigrant families and are targeted. And so I think if Trump wins on November 5th. November 6th, you won't see the immediate action. You won't see it for about another year because he is going to do his damnedest to put us back into a space of not even segregation. It's almost like just reconstruction. I think that's the era he wants to go back. I think when he says make America great again, I think he's thinking of reconstruction, where we're starting anew and everybody's going to be put in these certain boxes and everybody is supposed to have a fair shot, but there are still parameters that keep people from getting to where they need to go. If Kamala wins, I don't think you'll see something immediate either, but what you will see is a continuation of the things that they've already put in place under the Biden administration. For instance, capping the cost of insulin. Mm-hmm. In our community, hypertension and diabetes are huge. And so capping the cost of insulin, which is ridiculously expensive, that's going to matter. That's going to matter when it's the holiday season and you have to choose between having a holiday party or having holiday dinner and getting your medicine. I think when it comes to education, because if you think about Trump and Project 2025, they want to eliminate the Department of Education. And we see that now in Florida with them banning books, and now they're having, critical race theory out of, or what they think is critical race theory, having that taken out of history by putting things in there like Rosa Parks isn't black. Well, the problem with that is if she's not black, or I'm not able to tell what ethnicity she is, why was she protesting? No one's thinking about these things long term. So I think we will.
See, I don't know if I would disagree with you. I think somebody is thinking about these things long term, which is why they want to do these things, because the whole idea is that you get us into a place where when someone brings those things up, then you look at them like they're a crazy person, because that's not what I learned in school. I learned that she wasn't black.
But you don't, the math doesn't math. Why else would she be protesting?
Well, listen, logic has gone out the window a while ago.
Well,
we
yes.
have, you know what I mean? We have long passed, it's interesting, and I think the part for me is, how do we get people who have a disdain for politics and politicians Because I feel like that is one of the reasons why.
Well, you hear that a lot, though, with people saying, I don't do politics. Politics isn't my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we do is political. The moment you wake up in the morning and you turn the water on and take a shower, that's political. That's federally regulated.
Absolutely.
So that everything you do is political. When you walk out the street and you go and get gas out of a gas station, that's political. When you go to the grocery stores and you're debating, whether you're going to buy the 99-cent bread or the $1.09 bread, that's political. This is everything is a setup to be political. I think what people have to learn is, again, you're not voting for you. You're voting for future generations. It amazes me when people say, I'm not engaged in politics, but yet they live off of policies that have been given to them by Democratic policies. For instance, when you hear people talk about Medicare and Medicaid, those are Democratic policies put in by LBJ with his Great Society. And I'm not saying everybody has to be a political historian. I happen to like politics, so I'm a political historian. But you live off of the very policies that are given to you by a party of people who have done nothing but try to make this a more inclusive world. On the other side, he's trying to roll back everything that matters. He's trying to roll back education. He's trying to roll back healthcare. He tried to kill Obamacare. And what most folks didn't even realize is, especially in those rural parts of the world, where they were benefiting from Obamacare. The fact that it was called Obamacare is what pissed him off. If we had just called it healthcare or the American Health Care Act, which is what it was here in Massachusetts long before Barack Obama stepped on a stage, then nobody would have made a difference. He and a lot of people on the Republican side made it a race issue by calling it Obamacare.
Well, it's interesting that you said it about the whole Obamacare thing, because I remember Jimmy Kimmel had an episode of his show, and you can find a clip on YouTube still, where he goes into the street and he asks people what they think about Obamacare, and then he said, okay, well, what do you think about the American Care Act? And they're like, oh, yeah, that's right. The way we need to go.
Yes,
and it was amazing to me, because you would hear the anger that people would have around Obamacare. Well, I think
if most people were just honest that it is a race issue, right? Like, and I think nobody wants to be branded a racist, because when you think of racist, you think, the Ku Klux Klan and Knight Riders,
fire hoses,
and Bull O'Connor and all those people,
German shepherds, and things like that.
And so they don't equate themselves with that kind of extreme racism, but in fact it is, because covert racism is more dangerous than overt racism. I'd rather deal with Bull Connor spraying me down with a hose, because at least I know where he's coming from and who he is. It's the guy sitting in a corporate office somewhere in a suit and tie who's cutting out DEI in his now office, or he isn't giving me a job because he doesn't think I'm qualified as a black woman. That's the guy I'm afraid of. But so when it comes back to race, I wish more people, even today, I watch The Daily Show. And the guy, Jordan Klepper, I don't know if you watch his stuff. Jordan Klepper, Fingers to Pulse, it's very weird. But so, he asked this woman all these things that Trump did, but he didn't say the word Trump. He said, would you, vote for a guy who was convicted of sexual assault? And she's like, no. And then he's like, well, Trump did these things. And she goes, well, I don't care. Like, so it's not even about the moral part of it. And these are folks who call themselves Christians. It's not even the moral part of it. They just don't want to say, I don't want to vote for Barack Obama, or I don't want to vote for Kamala Harris. It pisses off the world more and more when you have an educated black woman who is now running for office. That is the major threat right now, because what people are told all your life, you're superior to this. These people don't exist. The Cosbys don't exist. And then Michelle and Barack show up. So when you've been told all along these people don't exist, and then the lie is exposed, now you have to face it. That pisses people off.
But I think the thing that scares me about this is that how do you fix that? Or how do you fight back against that? Because in reality, the things that I see that we're trying to push it in a progressive way are not just for, and I think this is part of why we don't have universal health care, is because the idea is that it's not so much that people are against the idea of not having bankruptcies that are created by healthcare. It's because the idea that some black dude is going to get a free cast for his broken leg, for some reason has groups of people in the United States like working against their own self-interest.
Healthcare is the biggest debt collector in this country. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this. I don't know if you've ever ridden in an ambulance before, but then you get the bill and it's like $1,400 to go 2 miles down the road in a big old box with some lights. So healthcare debt is huge. People tend to vote against their own interests because, again, goes back to where their moral fiber comes from. I will be honest and tell you, there are people in the world I don't like. It's not that I don't like them because of their color or their sexual orientation. There are just some people that get on my nerves. And there's 3 in particular people. One's from high school. But there's 3 of these people in particular. But I would rather base that off of my personal feelings about them. And I can be honest about that. In politics, people tend to think I can't be honest. If you think about our politicians, they use a lot of sound bites. They never, ever really come out and say, I'm pissed off at so-and-so. And when you ask them to confront that, it's, well, I have to work with this person. There was a guy who ran for mayor here in Boston, and he brought another politician into Roxbury. And the guy said, oh, I don't want to get my car stolen if I park it in Roxbury. I call out the guy who runs for mayor and I said, why wouldn't you say that why would you allow him to come into my neighborhood, your neighborhood, and say something like that? And he said, well, I can't confront him because I have to work with him, because he was a state rep at the time. And I said to myself, I don't even want you to be a state rep anymore at this point, because if you can't stand up, this man comes into what is traditionally a black neighborhood. He made a crack, which is rooted in racism. And you stand there as a Puerto Rican American and you say nothing. That said everything about you than it did about him. And so that's why I feel like a lot of people tend to think, well, I'm only voting for myself, because their politicians don't even stand up to the status quo.
But then how do we break this cycle to get to some real and fundamental change? Like, because the reason I'm asking this is because you have actually come from the standpoint of service within the community, but then also understanding the machinations of like getting someone in office. How do you figure out how to get to a place where we're actually having substantive change?
I don't have an answer for that, because you can't fix stupid sometimes. Like, I hate to say it that way, but you just can't. I think a lot of times what we have got to do with podcasts like Good Trouble and Politics and Prosecco is we have to continue to inform and engage people almost on a daily basis about why issues matter. I keep telling folks, especially in this race, don't think about the person. Think about the policies. When I read the Project 2025, which took me 3 months to read because it's huge, it's like 900 pages, I didn't understand all of it. What I did understand was, and I took those points out, but I had to educate myself enough, because I couldn't listen to the rhetoric that I was hearing from Democrats about it. They were only taking out things that they knew would be pain points for people and zeroing in on that. I knew there had to be more to it. So I had to do my own research. We have got to start getting our folks back in the habit of doing their own research, or if they're not going to do it, we have to inform and educate them wholehearteedly.
People say they do their own research, but it's really just looking at the first...
Going to TikTok is not doing your research.
Or looking at the first page of searches on Google.
Yeah.
That's like everybody's research.
Right.
Or going on to YouTube.
Or reading the summary and thinking you're getting everything that you need. Context is everything, especially in politics. You have to understand where things are coming from. When people write bills and legislation, you often hear, well, this bill didn't pass because I wasn't able to get this piece of legislation in there. You have politicians right now trying to pack and stack legislation for things that they want that they can't write on their own. That's dangerous, because you can get a filibuster that way. That's how filibusters happen. And so I think, like I said, we have to use these platforms that we have to continue to inform and educate people about why issues matter more than the people. Okay. And I get, like, I want to have a moral leader as a character, as a leader. I want them to have character, and I want them to be a stand-up type of person. Well, look, I don't really care. I honestly don't care, because I'm never going to invite Donald Trump to eat dinner at my house. He probably wouldn't anyway. Like, I'm not going to invite him to eat dinner at my house. What I am going to do, though, is make sure that as many people that I know and that I love and I care about are going to have, bless you, are going to have the information that they need to make an informed choice of why this man is a threat to democracy. He wants to overthrow the government. That's what he wants to do. And I don't even think he knows what a dictator is because he doesn't have the balls to be a dictator.
Well, I'm
Y'all gonna have
worried.
to bleep that, huh?
No, don't worry about it. Oh, we'll figure that out later.
I have kind of a potty mouth.
You? No.
I'm usually a very good girl, though.
So, my next question. Kind of understanding what's at play. We talked about that on a larger level. What do you think in terms of our local political scene? What do you think are going to be some of the major issues that we're going to see kind of play out over the next few years and next few election cycles?
Do you want nice or do you want honest?
I like both.
No.
I prefer honest. Go ahead.
So let me say this. In Boston in particular, the city council has made almost a 180 from where they were a year and a half ago. And that is because some of the most toxic behavior has been driven from the city council. And so now you have people who are actually focused on city business, constituencies, not trying to get their own, build their own political dynasties. And so I think that's been the first thing that I've noticed. Secondly, we're going to come right after this election, we're going to swing right into municipal elections. So the mayor is going to have to run for re-election. From what I understand, she does have she has some competition.
I feel like I see a couple people who are kind of positioning themselves.
I've heard 3 names out there, and if I were advising the mayor, I would start listening to what the people are having to say because, she's not a Marty Walsh, right? Where Marty he understood building relationships and building political relationships, but he also came from the State House, so he understood how to mix the two. And, so she doesn't have that. She also doesn't have the Mayor Menino's machine. After being years in service, he was able to build a machine. She's got to carve out what her niche is going to be. And that could be something from, she's having roundtables with what I consider kitchen table cabinet folks in every city and town. This is what we tried to do in Framingham, is in every part of whatever neighborhood it was, we had a kitchen cabinet. And it was people that we knew, stakeholders in the community. She's going to have to do that because some of the rhetoric that they're talking about is that she's a little distanced from the people. And so I think she's going to have some trouble there. I do think on the city council, though, it's time for some people to go. And I feel like you're going to see a lot of jockeying for position. In terms of, you're going to start seeing them coming out to more events. What you see with like a Ruthie is Ruthie's almost everywhere. It's almost like, girl, go home and take a nap. Like,
but I will say she is almost everywhere, but I also feel super authentic. I don't feel like she's going places for the, like, oh, I gotta make an appearance. No. Like, she legitimately wants to be in these places.
She has fun.
But she's also in community with people like, that's so-and-so event. I want to show and support and blah, blah, blah.
The point I'm making is, like, even in an off year, she's doing some of that.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that's what's important. There are definitely some people who only come out during election year. And that isn't just on the city council. I see that with U.S. Senate candidates, which is why they have competition. And so for the city council, I think what you're going to see is a lot more people coming into their own. City council is starting to garner more power. The legislation that they put through with people having a say in the budget was huge for them. That was, I don't think I'm going to participate in that, but I believe in participatory budgets. And I think that it is so key, so smart to do something like that, especially in a mid-sized city like Boston. Boston is not a big city. It's only big to those of us who grew up here, but it's a mid-sized city compared to like a Chicago or San Francisco or places like that. So participatory budget in a mid-sized city, that is brilliant. That is absolutely the smartest thing that the city council could have done. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. People are going to start carving out what their next steps are going to be. whether they're going to run for mayor one day.
I was going to say, do you think there's a lot of people who are kind of figuring out what their next office is going to be? Because I think that sometimes, when Mayor Menino was in office, it's almost like, why would you even think about trying to run for mayor? Like, it's just a waste of your time, and it's just an exercise in futility. But, you know what I mean? But I think that is there a situation where you're seeing people who are like, okay, they think they might be ready to make the next step, and there'll be that domino effect, or?
No, because I think millennials and Gen Z don't give a damn about incumbency. They are willing to challenge. They have more courage. We have more courage than boomers had. And we certainly think a little bit more forward thinking and progressive than Generation X. So I think you're going to see people who aren't going to wait their turn. They're just going to run. And I think you have some power hitters on this team. You've got Julia. You've got Brian Worrell, you've got Rusi. Like these are people who automatically are thinking of, how do I best position myself in the community so I can do the work of the people? I don't see that from everybody on the council. And that's fine. Everybody's not supposed to be a superstar. But to me, that trifecta, I think that we're going to hear more from them.
Well, do you think it'll be... In what regard? Will it be in state politics? You think they'll be moving into...
Well, if you think about it, so think about the city council before, right? Lydia went on to become a state senator, right? Andrea, I mean, talk about losing the battle but winning the war. She was like, F this city stuff. I'll see y'all on the Commonwealth. And then you saw AP. Now she's in the delegation. So... I don't think that it's necessarily a ladder up to mayor. I think you're going to see people wanting to explore, how can I make the best impact for my people? Unfortunately, though, I don't think there's going to be any movement on the congressional side because AP is not going to go anywhere unless they open up another seat in Boston, which could happen if our population grows. But I definitely think you're going to see a lot more people make runs for State House. And that means either in the legislature and or the state offices, which I would be here for.
Who is?
Look at you trying to ask me who specifically.
No.
I'm dodging the question, apparently.
What I was going to ask, thank you. And this is the type of stuff that will go into the relationship podcast because you gave me a space where I could communicate my feelings that maybe...
Listen, I hear you.
You know what I'm saying? So what I was going to say, you named those folks. Who are some of the other folks that you think are kind of on the rise politically that we should be like looking out for?
You mean building the bench?
Yes, in terms of like we talked about Rusi, we talked about Brian Worrell, and we talked about Julia Mejia. Who are some of the other people that you say, you know what, couple of minutes, like that person, they're going to be in the game?
Yeah. So I would love for this to happen. Eric Estevez is an amazing individual. I don't know if he'll ever run for political office, but if he did, I could see him being that guy who could build the bench for us.
Definitely see Pops doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I see Pops being... I don't necessarily see him in politics per se, but I definitely see him being of service. I think that is...
Well, he's of service now.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. So I think that it's a logical extension that he might consider going into politics, but he definitely does not strike me as a person... There's some people who I meet and they want to be politicians. And there are certain people that I meet who want to be of service. And sometimes those people are the same.
Yes.
And sometimes they're not.
Yes. But see, I think of him as a combination of that.
Okay.
I think of that. I think that we talked about Rufus. I think, and these are people who have run before. It just, the timing might have been off. So I see like a Rufus. There's so many really smart, sharp minds. Carrie Mays is a smart girl. She's young now, but I can definitely see her making a move into politics. And a lot of these people already belong to spaces where they are being impactful. Carrie's on the reparations committee, and I know she's doing some work with teen empowerment. Bianca Clark is another one who absolutely could run for office one day and win because she's smart and she's sharp and she don't take no mess from nobody, and I love that. So I see people like that, and there are definitely some people that I know have run before or were in office and could run again. But then it comes like, are you making room for the next person?
So, Yeah, so that's interesting to hear about that kind of the idea of that rotating bench. And what do you think are some of the issues that are really going to be facing us as a region and as a city? Like, because we talked about kind of the challenges of that kind of are in front of those people in those seats. But what are the things that we are going to need to address? Like, for example, I think that one of the things will probably be the fact that there's so many vacant spaces downtown and that there's work that's being done with that. But that work is also needs to be done in all the vacant spaces all across the city. And how do you activate those spaces? Like, what do you think are some of the issues that are pressing? Like, obviously, we talk about our population in terms of where people are going to live and things like that.
Housing is going to be huge, especially over the next couple of years in Boston. So I bought my house during the pandemic. And I was intentional about buying in Roxbury. I wanted to be in Roxbury. I had looked at some other places, but I wanted Roxbury. And I wanted Roxbury because I remember something Marty Walsh said to me years ago when he said, when the city expands and the city starts to bring in more talent, people are going to want to be close to downtown. And if I were you, I would think about living in Roxbury. At the time, I lived in Quincy. And he was pissed that I lived in Quincy, that I wasn't back in Boston. So I kept that in the back of my head. This is why it's important to listen to the things around you and the people around you and store that away. And I'm somebody that plays the long game. So I knew, like, okay, I can't buy a house right now, Marty, but I'm certainly buy one eventually. And so housing is going to be huge. And as more young people who live and work in the city want to start to build out a financial future with some stability, housing is going to be the first part, because we know that the path to the middle class is not only through education, but it's through home ownership. And so I think that when you see more people starting to run for office, they're going to start using housing as one of their blocks to get people engaged and informed. We have to have more, I don't like to call it affordable housing. I like to call it living wage housing, because $100,000 to me might be very different from you. I don't have any children. I'm not married. So my $100,000 is going to go a lot further than somebody with 2 children, a dog, a cat, and a husband. So it has to be living wage housing. We have to start thinking about what that looks like to people. And also, you know, I don't think it's fashionable to live in the seaport, right? I don't think it's fashionable to live in these high rises that have a pool, a sauna, and a gym that I'm not investing back into. And they're renting them out for $2,500, for 400 square feet. We have to start thinking about, to these developers, what does that look like? What does a clean living space look like that's not overly priced? No one should be paying $3,000 to live in a 1-bedroom apartment. I don't even pay that for a mortgage, and I have 3 bedrooms. So 2 bedrooms and an office. But you know what I'm saying? Like that kind of mentality. So we as a city have to start thinking about what that looks like. I mean, there's so many other ways. Parking has become an issue. Traffic is an issue. The bike lanes are driving everybody crazy. And what the problem is, it's not that we shouldn't have bike lanes. We haven't expanded the streets.
Well, it's not just that. Okay. So anybody knows me, especially anybody who's listening to me that knows me personally, knows I hate these bike lanes. And I hate these bike lanes for a couple of reasons. Number one, I feel like it is a disingenuous solution to a problem that we have in the city. If the idea is that we want to figure out other ways for people to move around that do not impact the environment in the same way, I'm nothing wrong with that. But we live in Boston, so there's going to be snow on the ground. Who's riding in that bike lane in the middle of January? So that's number one. Then add on top of that, you gave me a bike lane, but you didn't give me a more effective way to move around the city through public transportation.
And if you notice, we don't have any bike shops that are in the city. Like, you have to go. So I have a bike.
Okay.
I don't ride it, though. Not enough. Well, you know what it is? I ride it. I go to a park to ride it.
Okay.
But part of that is, we haven't made any accommodations to even have bikes in the city. So one of the things that the issue with Boston is it's an old city. The streets are still narrow. It's still very horse and buggy-ish around here.
And you took a lane away.
You took a lane away. And
bikes.
that was the issue that I had. And I actually said that to the mayor. It's like, look, it's cool to have bike lanes, but why didn't you just expand the street? If you think of American Legion Highway, which is now just literally back-to-back traffic, getting from my house to Roxbury, getting from Roxbury to Hyde Park takes me about an hour, and it's literally 3 miles away.
And who is riding on a bike down American Legion Highway?
I wouldn't do that as a kid, so I don't know who is the...
Never in the history of ever, I've never seen anybody ride on that bike lane.
But if you think about it in terms of just holistically, politically, we are putting in things and policies, but we're not actually thinking about what the outcome is going to be. It's like setting a goal and not understanding how to get to the goal. So now we have bike lanes that are causing more traffic. Everybody is mostly back to work now. So, you have more cars on the road. There's not enough parking. Boston has a lot of one-way streets. Those streets are permitted parking now. No one has made a plan. We need a city planner, not only just a mayor. We need a planner, somebody who understands how cities are supposed to work. If you go to New York, they have bike lanes in some spaces. You don't see a bike lane down Fifth Avenue. You don't see a bike lane down Wall Street. You don't see a bike lane on 46th Street. It's just because New York understands, one, it's very congested, and two, if you live in New York, most people walk everywhere they need to be. But those who do drive a car, they make the streets for the cars. They don't make them for the bike lanes. You want to ride your bike? There's a big old park in the middle of Manhattan called Central.
Well, the other part of it is they have an effective transportation system that allows people to, it actually may make more sense. It makes more sense sometimes when you're in New York to hop on the train than it does to get in an Uber or get in a taxi.
I would rather get on a train in New York. I mean, people watching, amazing. Take the A train to Harlem. I
don't need to see all that, and I don't necessarily need to see Showtime every time I get on the damn train.
Yes, you do.
No, I do not.
But what I'm saying is, like, Boston hasn't made any real plans for the things that they want to implement, and that is a problem. And housing is connected to transportation, which is connected to parking, which is connected to people wanting to stay here. We have the best schools, the best hospitals. People want to come here and work and train. But if I'm frustrated every morning because I have to drive from my house to the hospital and there's 5,000 cars down, mass and cast, that's a problem. Yeah. I'm frustrated. So I'm going to go either to a small country town and be a doctor, or I'm going to go to a city and be a lawyer where I can hop on the train and get downtown in 2 minutes. Yeah. Or uptown.
And then when I think about the impact on the businesses, like we've got these bike lanes, and now the stores that I could normally just kind of hop out and run in the store real quick, like I'm driving right by that store.
But if you
there's
think
no
about
effective
Moody
parking
Street in Waltham, they expanded Moody Street. Before, when it was just crazy, like, Moody Street was not great.
That is true.
They expanded it, and it became a restaurant hub. Now, like, it's kind of cool to hang out on Moody Street in Waltham. I know where you like to go.
No, I've been to Moody Street. Thank you very much. Watch your mouth.
But what I'm saying is someone thought through that plan. I don't think they do that here in Boston. And if I were advising the mayor on her next election, that's going to come up because people are tying her to the bike lanes. They're tying her to the traffic, and she's going to have to defend that.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how things shake out in the near future in our political landscape. I'm interested to see who the winners, or who's going to come out on top over the next couple of years, and the impact that will have. Because I feel like our neighborhoods all across the city are changing.
I was in Rosendale the other day, and I grew up in Hyde Park, and Rosendale was the next neighborhood over, and it just looks completely different to me. Hyde Park looks different. Everybody so wants to live in Hyde Park now. When I grew up there, it was like desolate.
Yeah, because Hyde Park was far.
It is not.
Yes, it is. It's far. That is the outside of civilization.
Good night.
In terms of the city. Before, you know what I'm saying? So to your point, like back before.
Yes, and now everybody wants to live there.
Yeah, but people's mindset was like, that is the farthest place in the world.
Didn't seem that far. I always hung out in Roxbury, though. So I went to school in Roxbury. My friends were in Roxbury. My friends Deanna and Annalie, and they were all lived on the fort. So I hung out in Roxbury. I barely hung out in Hyde Park.
Yeah, so you didn't even want to be there.
It wasn't that I wanted to be there. It seemed like Roxbury had all the action. That's where the good-looking dudes were. That's where the fun was. I went to high school there, so yeah.
Because nobody wanted to go all the way to Hyde Park. You see how that translates?
No, I don't.
See, there's a central hub of activity, fun, and happiness, and then there's Hyde Park.
Roxbury versus everybody.
Well, yeah.
See?
Whatever.
See?
Oh, listen, I appreciate you coming by today.
Thank you.
We had
This
an
was
incredible
fun.
conversation. We will do this again.
Oh, good, I hope.
We will do this again. I feel like I need to have you come on and explain all the political things to me every so often.
No. You're doing good.
No,
But
I definitely need you.
Can I just make a few points, though?
Please.
I just want to remind people that October 26th is the last day to vote. To register in person to vote, and then to make sure they come out and vote on November 5th. Early voting has already started here in Massachusetts, but please, like it's too much at stake for you to sit at home or for you to waver in your decision.
Yes, and I think that people, particularly in Massachusetts, sometimes think, oh, we got it in the bag, and we don't necessarily got it in the bag.
That's the show I should come back on, how Massachusetts is actually not as liberal as people think it is.
Yes, we will definitely have that conversation.
Yeah.
So listen, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And people, if you are out there, please make sure you tune in.
Tuesdays at 1 p.m. on Spark FM Online, Politics and Prosecco.
Yes, you can get you a nice glass while you're sitting at home. And
Or
you
in
can
person.
join in the conversation. I'm talking about until you start doing live shows.
Yes, we all get sauced together. We love it.
There you go. Listen, folks, we appreciate you. Make sure you like, subscribe, and all the razzmatazz that everybody on digital tells you to do. And until next time, make sure you stay in some good trouble.
Yes.